Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sage Rosenfels Experience on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Today, I have Kevin Carter, longtime defensive lineman in the NFL, 14 years, never missed a game as a player. I can't tell you how impossible that is to do. Currently, he works for CBS Sports covering college football. Kevin and I were teammates together in Miami. He's a really good friend. He was a great player, should be in the Hall of Fame, but Hall of Fame person all around. So enjoy the podcast. I thought it was a good one.
From the Channel Seed Studios, this is the Sage Rosenfels Experience, exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Channel Seed, seedsmanship at work.
Mr. Carter, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Everybody, this is Kevin Carter. He is currently in New York City because he has real things going on, especially on the weekends. He works for CBS Sports, covers a lot of college football, some pro football, I would assume.
Some pro football.
Some pro football, but really is deep into that college football world. You see him on your television screens. You see him in extremely nice pinstripe suits on your Saturdays. So I appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on. This show, the Sage Rosenfels Experience, is what we call it because it is sort of just a random mix of people from my past that have impacted me or just I've enjoyed being around and thought I could interview. You disappeared. Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
Thought I could interview and so people that follow the show could I don't know, have a little taste of what I got to have when I was playing football. We spent 1 year together. That's right. You were in Miami for 2 years. I was there for 1 year, 2006. We will get to that. We'll get to that and sort of how we became friends. But growing up, you grew up in Miami. Is that right? Or you grew up in Florida? Like where did you grow up?
I was born in Miami. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital there in Miami, and but I grew up in Tallahassee. So
you did.
We moved away when I was probably 4 or 5 o'clock. 4 or 5. And
how did you growing up end up at Florida? Obviously, spend all your time in Tallahassee. Which you assumed. I mean, for Iowans, it's like growing up in Ames and going to Iowa. Like you just sort of don't do that very often.
I think being there, growing up there and kind of culturally seeing it all the time, kind of having it kind of stuffed down your throat. Florida State was appealing to me from a football standpoint. I mean, they were impressive. But back in those days, it was the early 90s. So you couldn't go wrong going to Florida State or Miami. They were all top 10 programs at the time. And you had the appeal of each of the schools, Deion Sanders and the whole primetime thing at Florida State. You had Emmitt Smith and guys going to the league, at Florida. And of course, Miami had the bad boys and they were winning national championships and everything else. So kind of a heyday in college football in the state of Florida.
Yeah, definitely.
I won 3 out of 4 SEC titles at Florida, which is unheard of these days. But no, being in Tallahassee, kind of growing up there with Florida State, it was kind of saturated. So when my eyes got opened during my visiting process, I realized that there's a whole lot more to life than just the hometown school. And my older brother had went away to school. He went to East Carolina and played football there. So, for me, it came down to Notre Dame and Florida. Lou Holtz captivated me in a way that I was 17 years old and I was a kid that, read a lot. I was a kid that was probably your atypical football player in that I didn't start playing football until my junior year in high school. I was in marching band my freshman year in high school. I had a late growth spurt. And so I wasn't like one of these people that, you hear about these kids that are prodigies or they take to it, and they're can throw a football before they can talk or walk or do anything. And that was not me whatsoever. I truly grew into, I had a love and a fascination and I had an imagination, but I was really a nerd. Growing up, I was a band geek, was into comic books. I read a lot. I played every sport. I just wasn't great at anything. And so, but I had a growth spurt my freshman year in high school after my freshman sophomore year, and kind of went out and played football, and everything made sense. So to a kid like that who was coming into the recruiting process, I think I was atypical to a lot of coaches who encountered me. And so, but Lou Holtz was special. Like he was the person that was like, you belong here at Notre Dame. It's like, you are an eclectic young man who has potential. You're well read, and you have no idea how much wonder there is in this world. Come to Notre Dame, and we will forge this dream with you together. And I was like, where do I sign? Like, I was captivated by Touchdown Jesus and everything else. And so Florida State really didn't come into the equation for me once I got a taste of what was out there.
Yeah, but instead of going with Lou and going for it, you went with Steve, which is completely opposite. I have a Sage an experience with Steve Spurrier in my past. I had my year 2. I'm with Washington, and Marty Schottenheimer gets fired. In comes Steve Spurrier and a bunch of his coaches from Florida. And I'm the only quarterback in the roster. We immediately signed Shane Matthews. Danny Warfel, Shane Matthews. And then we drafted a quarterback in the first round, Patrick Ramsey. So guess who was not going to make the team? That was going to be me. And I was traded to Miami, which I ended up meeting you years later. So how did you end up, not going for the Lou Holtz Notre Dame fight song and going a couple hours away to Florida State's rival in Florida?
Well, Steve Spurrier was interesting at the time. He was young and captivating, and he was a lot younger than a lot of the other coaches that I was encountering at the time. But he was dynamic. I respected the way that he lived his life and the way that he treated his family, treated his wife and his family. Like his wife was like Miss Jerry, Jerry Spurrier to this day. If you know her, she is a badass. Like, she is a dynamo. The woman's, 80 years old if she's a day, but she still runs like 5 miles every other day. I mean, she's, just crazy, just, salt of the earth, wonderful person, makes cookies for every person on the team on their birthday. Like, so she's always baking cookies or doing something for someone else. And, and I meet these people, and I'm a kid, but they're like parents, but they're like the super on steroids summer camp parents, vacation parents that you get to hang out with every day.
In a different experience at Iowa State, Dan McCarney was our head coach. His wife, Margie, she on every one of my high school, the occasional time I go on Facebook, on every one of my college teammates that I'm friends with, she has a comment. Congratulations, happy birthday. I mean, it's like she is everybody's sort of grandmother, other mother, or whatever, a mother away from home. And I think that's a role that really becomes important to the head coach, important to the team. Because there are a bunch of 17, 18, 19-year-old kids away from their parents in a distant land where everything is completely different and everyone around is completely different and the stakes are high. To have somebody like that, a part of that process. Yeah.
And she was, and I had great parents, don't get me wrong. But having that appeal and seeing that he could be an amazing coach and assemble and do what we did with that kind of family life at home, that's what really captivated me, because it's like you could have it all. You could do both. You can be this coach. And this guy won the ACC at Duke, in 1989. So I'm like, Florida State's pretty good then. Clemson's pretty good back then, and it's like, but he wins the ACC at Duke. He's got this new innovative offense where he's just throwing it all over the field and everything else. And he captivated me. And he was the one that told me point blank, he's like, look, you can come and help us win, or you can go somewhere else and get beat by us, possibly. He's like, we're building something special. He says, look, I'm not even gonna, sugarcoat it. And he's like, a lot of these coaches are gonna try to sell these kids that they are the missing piece, that they're going to be the difference between winning and losing. He said, Kevin, he says, that's sort of a trick question. He says, because everyone, despite their contribution on this team, whether it be big or small, is exactly the difference between winning and losing. And I was like, wisdom that he spits. He was like, and he says to go further than that, he says, Kevin, you are the kind of person, you're the kind of kid. You're not just a ball player. There's a lot more to you. He's like, you have substance. He's like, people like you are glue. He's like, when you say that you'll come play for me, you'll be surprised at the domino effect that will follow. We're gonna get players, and you're gonna be the first of a lineage of great players that rings through the halls of Valhalla, one day. And I mean, he's selling me this thing and telling me that what I can be a part of and how I can galvanize and energize and motivate and be a cornerstone for what we're building, and we all entered into that agreement with Spurrier, and in that way, myself and the Ellis Johnsons of the world and the Jack Jacksons and the Chris Dorings and the Danny Werfels and the Shane Matthews and the Fred Taylors and the Jacquez Greens and the Isaac Hilliards. I mean, the list goes on of players back then. Like, we had no idea what we were building, what we were becoming a part of. But as I look back in history, 3 out of 4 years I won an SEC title. I've got 3 SEC rings.
Yeah.
No one does that. I was a part of something special in a way that, that changed Florida football forever. People hated Coach Spurrier. He talked trash. He was cocky. He beat you by 20 points and say, well, could have scored 30, but, it'll be all right. And it was just like, and no one could touch us. We had an esprit de corps amongst ourselves that I'm glad to have been a part of, because I think it set in motion what I was always looking for when I got to the NFL. I was heartbroken at first when I didn't have it, when I thought it didn't exist. But then I met a man named Dick Vermeil, in my 3rd year, and that man loved everyone, more than you can ever, and expected more out of you than you ever thought of yourself. And it didn't matter. We were gonna work our ass off through it, and he was gonna love you through it. And so I was really fortunate like that to go from playing from someone like Steve Spurrier to encountering, the different coaches and people that I did on the NFL level. But I don't even know what question you asked me.
No, it's okay. No, it's great. Do you feel the coaches, though, like whether it's Spurrier or Kirk Ferentz at Iowa or Matt Campbell at Iowa State or whoever it is, when they see a special talent, and when you go into a high school and you see a kid who academically is in the top of his class, but physically you just see natural God-given gifts that this kid is huge and he's big and he's strong, and man, we get him in the weight room some more, and he's just going to be like, there's only so many that come through high school football every year. There's only so many guys like that.
Right.
And I played with a lot of great defensive linemen, a lot of great offensive linemen, a lot of great all sorts of players, but there are, I feel like there are almost like special humans physically and mentally and emotionally and all those things that go into it. And however you were raised, discipline that a program like Florida can be like, no, this one guy, he said that, but he's like, but this one guy can not really change our culture, but he can be the sort of cornerstone of what this team's culture is going to be.
Right. I think recognizing special talent along the way, and not just in players. Okay. And I tell people this, and because people ask my opinion of coaches all the time, and it's because it's just not just them. It's who they surround themselves with. So yes, on the level of coaches, on the level of players, yes, you're looking, when you see that special kid, and you see that kid who can change, who can galvanize, who can be a part of, symbolizing a change or movement forward in a different direction. Yeah, I think it behooves you to empower that child that way, and I think the same can be said of who you surround yourself from a coaching standpoint. Because someone asked me the other day, I was talking to someone about Billy Napier at Florida, and he was like, "What do you think about Billy Napier?" And I'm like, "Man, I've spent time with Billy Napier. Like, I like the guy. He's a man's man. He's a football guy. He's an incredible, like, off the charts, like, emotional, like, awareness and IQ, like, for humanity. His spirit, his heart's in the right place, but he's just made of good stuff, and he's like one of those people, and you're like, but my only question is, who are your coaches? Who have you surrounded yourself from a coaching standpoint? And that isn't always indicative of how special you are as a person.
Yeah.
Because you have to get people have to be sold to come along with you, and they have to be made to believe. And at any given moment, maybe you haven't assembled that right cast that will accentuate and make his program the type of program that it deserves to be. But it's important on all levels when you find that type of talent to really examine and build those types of relationships, because that's how you win a championship. An NFL coach, the biggest test of an NFL coach is how to be the manager of personalities, because by the time you get there, everyone is capable. Even most of your coaches are, they know what they're doing, but selling them and getting them to believe and buy in that their contribution is the difference between winning and losing. And I think that's what you're always trying to do.
And at the same time, the players are constantly in this position that I feel like there's always this like small selfish aspect to all of it of like, yeah, we won,
Yeah.
but I didn't really play. And, but a head coach has to continue to get every single person to, get on the airplane, go home, wake up the next day, come into work, let's go it again. We're going to give it another try, and to truly believe, to truly care. Those film sessions, the details, they really do matter at 4:00 in the afternoon when you're like, it could be going, it does matter. That does the head coach in football, do you think is more important to a team than any other sport that we play, than basketball, than hockey, than baseball? Do you feel like football, it's like sort of is about the head coach that just sets the whole program up because they find the right coaches?
If
they find the right coaches, they find the right players, they surround themselves with those people, and it all just sort of rises together.
The coach in football, I think, is more, because I think football is the ultimate team sport. I think we can say that on different levels, and obviously you've got to work together as a team in basketball, and but you can have a couple of unbelievable pieces that can, in football, it does not matter how great I am at defensive end if the person who plays opposite of me can't hold or it's totally contingent upon someone else. Like, you can be the best receiver. Like last night, I'm watching, the Commanders and, play last night. And I'm like, everyone thinks that, of course, the Commanders are going to beat the Bears. And, the Bears are about to fire their coach. And next thing you know, and I laugh at that because you and I know the true nature of the NFL. And when people say, oh, Justin Fields, he sucks. And you're like, nobody in the NFL sucks. Okay. Stop that. Like on his worst day, he is better than anyone you've ever seen who's the best player in your state growing up. Like, not even close. But I say all that to say this, someone's going to figure it out and put it together, and put it together for game day and beat your ass. And so when I look at, a team like, with Justin Fields and everyone and everything is lost, DJ Moore couldn't have had the night that he had without Justin Fields. Okay. And vice versa. Like, it works in tandem. Like, it's the ultimate team sport. So whenever you have, special pieces, or whenever you have, special players or coaches or anything, yeah, selling them. Your head coach is everything. He sets the culture. He sets it comes downhill from him, what his philosophy is, how he deals with people, how he empowers people, how he bitches people out, how he reprimands, and the examples that he makes, and whether he tolerates a prima donna or everyone's treated the same, or, all of that. It's what, my dad always told me that, nothing in life matters unless it matters to you. And he's like, it's like people live their lives and do all kinds of stuff. He's like, but if the person that's, in the park kicking a pine cone, if that's his goal every day, if he's fulfilled by that, like, it doesn't matter to anyone else, but it freaking matters to him. So, these teams talk about is how important is the head coach. I think the head coach in football is paramount. He sets the culture. Sometimes the head coach gets credit for teams and chemistry that he didn't build and that he's not responsible for. Sometimes the players take leadership and they have to, everyone has to feel like they're the difference and has to be invested and take ownership. But your head coach, ultimately, I think you're only going to get as far as his ability to empower other people.
Do you feel like, did you watch Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Do you feel like so many people watch Ted Lasso? And coaches watched it too, and their wives watched it, and
right.
the kids watch it.
Yeah.
The player, high school kids watch that show. Everyone watched that show. Do you feel like the quote unquote Ted Lasso way, as I like to call it, is will actually change football coaching and maybe even other sports too, but like really change the way even coaches, like maybe they look at things a little bit differently, and it did open up sort of like that type of more maximizing the human thinking,
right.
and then you'll maximize the player, right? Do you think Lasso could have changed sports in that way, or do you think it's always going to be this, Nick Saban screaming at you type of business that coaching is?
Well, the one thing I'll say is this: I think there's always more than one way to skin a cat. I think you see different examples of great coaches that are able to get it done in different ways. I think Coach Vermeil had a little bit of Ted Lasso in him. But I know that Dick Vermeil had a lot of Nick Saban in him as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. It was barbaric. It was rough. There's a harsh reality to football that I think that doesn't exist in other sports. There's a physical toughness, common denominator that if you don't have it on a game day, no matter how talented you are, you get your ass beat because you get out hit. It's like, if you're not tough enough, if you can't protect your quarterback, or if you can't run the ball, it's like so I think that issue, that aspect of playing football, of having that, I think that's kind of a given. And I think with Vermeil, it was very much, he had to get us to a point where he trusted us. He had to get us to a point where we were browbeat enough to be open to our potential, and nothing was going to phase us in terms of us getting discouraged, us losing hope, because everything, the worst had already happened to us, basically. And so that's where he was taking us. He said, in 3 years, we'll be world champs. And he says, not everyone in this room is going to be here to see that come to fruition, but in 3 years, we will be world champs. And and he's kind of a look to your left, look to your right speech. And there were 12 guys that were left on that team, the Rams, when he came in, that held that trophy up. And, he's walking around, it's on NFL films, and he's, at the end, when he hoists the trophy and the confetti's raining down in the Georgia Dome, Super Bowl 34, he said, Kevin Carter, you're a Super Bowl champion. He's saying, Kurt Warner, you're a Super Bowl champion. DeMarco Farr. Now, the names he's calling out are those guys. Keith Lyle, Todd Light, Mike Jones. It's like there's 12 of us that were there, and that's it. So, yeah, I think Ted Lasso, I think I love the show, and I love how it highlights no matter what, because you can say that it's all about having this hard ass beat the crap out of you, scream and yell at you mentality. But even on those teams found a measure of their own humanity. They either rallied against the coach, or they rallied along with one another. they found a strength and found a voice and found that esprit de corps that once they had it, you couldn't tell them anything. They had the confidence, they had the supreme confidence that they were going to win every time they come out. That's even on those teams where you have a guy yelling and screaming, I think you still have the human side, within that. I think that sometimes it's just not recognized. And I think I love Ted Lasso for that, because it did show that, you get a lot more honey, catch a lot more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah. Talk to me about Kurt Warner, native Iowan, and your teammate, Super Bowl champion.
Yeah.
With you. Talk about your experience with him. How team you're already there. Who's this guy? He's the backup. All right. Some preseason games. Tell me how that went. Not the whole movie, movie, but give me your feel for old Kurt.
Kurt was our third string quarterback, and Kurt ran our scout team the year before. We were 5-11. We were horrible. We were the Rams. We were joking our division. We were struggling team. We were the team that, one of those teams that you didn't, kind of like the Bears, like they're going to put it together and they're going to win 4 or 5 games. You just, hopefully you're not one of those teams that they put it together on. And but he was our third string quarterback, and he'd run our scout team. And I remember the year before Super Bowl, we were 5-11, and we'd be in practice sometimes, and I used to get pissed off at our secondary because we'd have to do plays over. We have to repeat plays, and I'm like, Todd, man, what the hell, dude? What could we're not covering anybody back there? We're getting the rush from quarterback, but we can't touch the quarterback, so we're kind of going around them, letting them throw the ball to get the work, to get the look for our secondary. And he's like, bro, homeboy doesn't miss. He's like, he came from the Arena League or whatever. He said, this motherfucker does not miss. And I'm like, what you mean he don't miss? And he's like, bro, he's like hella accurate, man. He's like, he just, T-Light. And he's like, bro, he just don't miss. And they're like, I'm looking at the DBs and they're like, bro, what you want? And so, and that he frustrated us like that. But like, Kurt was part of our team. Like during that time, you have to understand there was a very organic process that was going on as we were getting our brains beat in. Coach Vermeil went down the roster, okay, and it wasn't by position, it was by alphabetical order. And he took groups of 8 guys, and your significant other, or whoever your homeboy, whoever you lived with, or you come by yourself, he was going to have you over. He was going to do a big London broil, and his big grill and his big smoker. And he was going to open a couple of bottles of wine and have you over and see what the hell made you tick. He was going to do this. And he did this every Wednesday night. He'd have a group of 8 to 10 guys over at his house and their wives. And it's just at first it was awkward, because he went down the roster just doing it. And you went to his house and broke bread with him more than once in a season, and it was awkward and it was kind of corny and some guys didn't like it. And it's just talk about Kurt, we knew Kurt. Kurt was our third string guy. He just came in from the Iowa Barnstormers. He was, good dude. We were like, cool, And so, but a funny thing happened going into the offseason between what was my 4th year and my 5th year in the NFL. And that offseason, we didn't draft anybody at the quarterback position. We drafted, I think that was the draft. We either brought in Orlando Pace or Grant Wistrom. I think it was Orlando. We brought in that draft, and either Torrey Holt. So those were his draft picks. Grant Wistrom, first round draft picks. Grant Wistrom, Torrey Holt, and Orlando Pace. 3 pretty good picks for your first round picks. But Kurt gets moved up to number 2 because our second string quarterback, Jamie Martin, we traded him away to Jacksonville. Yeah. So Kurt becomes number 2. And, of course, Coach Dick Vermeil is saying, no, Kurt's my number 2. And he's and he loved him. Kurt, Coach loved him. Coach, there's an individual story about everybody on that team of how Coach Vermeil, loved you and, picked you. So I have a story like that. Everybody has a story where you were singled out at one point, and that's, but anyway, so we have, we're going over to dinner at his house. Kurt becomes number 2. We bring in, that offseason, we bring in Trent Green from Washington, bring in Mike Martz. Mike Martz had been there before. He was an offensive coach for us before, and then he left to take the quarterback, the OC job in Washington, and then he came back. So that offseason, whole lot's, shaken. I mean, we bring in Trent Green. Mike Martz comes in. We draft Torrey Holt. You bring in, Oz Hakeem and Tony Horn, all these other players, and we don't get any more quarterbacks, And so right now we've got 1 and 2, and we drafted Joe Germain. So Joe Germain's running our scout team now. He's our youngster, and but he's not going to play. But Kurt, like in the event anything happens to Trent, Kurt's the dude.
Arena League.
And Kurt was in the Arena League less than a year before. Okay. But that's how Coach Vermeil did business. If he loved you and singled you out and said you could play, then you could play. I'm standing on the field during the rookie minicamp. I'm not practicing, okay? I'm not participating in the rookie minicamp. I'm just there at the facility talking to Coach Vermeil and Charlie Army on the sideline. Charlie Army is our GM, okay? And we're looking at the rookies run around, and there's a guy, it's this little short, stubby linebacker who he was a point guard at John Carroll University for the basketball team, but he also played football. HBCU, who's this kid? Charlie Army says that guy's going to be our starting middle linebacker. He's going to play 16 years, going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. I'm like, what's his name? London Fletcher. Okay. Sure. Okay. That little kid, whatever. Don't think anything of it. Next thing you know, halfway through the season, this kid's calling the signals in my huddle. And he's keep barking at me, telling me where to get my ass lined up. So, when everything like that during that time was pretty much storybook, and it started off with a story of him choosing you, singling you out, believing in you, loving you, empowering you. And that process for so many of us on those teams. And like I said, all of us have a special story, and it's the most giddy, funny, warm and fuzzy thing you've ever heard in your life, but it's 100% true. Kurt Warner, came into that season. In the preseason, we were killing people. We were so excited. Everything was completely different. We had gone through barbaric training camps before. Coach Vermeil stopped one practice in the middle, the third year that he was there, and called us up together and said, "You guys are finally ready. We've traversed these milestones psychologically, and we're ready. We're poised. So we're going to completely redo everything we do in practice. Our practices are not going to be long anymore. They're going to be crisp. We're going to get out. We're going to do this, and the accountability to get everything done right, and for everyone to be on time, to make their workouts, to make their meetings, to do everything right. The onus is going to be on you." And we looked at each other like we've been going through some bullshit, in terms of 2.5-hour full pad practices. I mean, it was like darn near a mutiny, in St. Louis with the Rams. It was bad, when Vermeil first came in. And that's why I say there's a little bit of Nick Saban in him as well, because there was a tempering, kind of going through the fire that we had to go through before he was going to relinquish that. And
do you feel when he sort of released you guys to your own ownership of the team, really, right? He basically said, okay, you guys get it now. This is your team. It's different when you work for the team or you're on the team but somebody else owns it. The head coach owns it, or the university owns it, or whatever, right? But when a coach can actually get a team to the point where all 53 plus the coaches plus a practice squad,
right,
when they own it per se, as far as this really is their team.
Yeah.
Does that empowerment, do you think, I said, sort of release a team to the best version of themselves, and that's what happened to you guys. I mean, you guys are loaded with talent, of course,
Mhm.
you have great talented players, but that mixed with that talent, sort of your magic sauce, you think on those great St. Louis teams?
Yes, and I'll add another thing, and there's an element of accountability, and I think that's what, because I think, you know, you get to the point where you're bitching and complaining about how someone is doing something, and then you work all the way through it, and you get to a place where you have an understanding between what you thought was oppressive, and you can deal with it. But now the person is saying that was all for show. It was more about the exercise of you gaining control and believing in one another and owning this. This is really not about me. This is about you. And then you turn around at that point and you're like, yeah, we're not gonna fuck this up, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. And so we looked at each other in that moment, and everyone had the same look in their eye, and it was the same look that we had in our eye when it was halftime, when we were 7-0, and we went into Nashville, and the Titans were beating our ass in the first quarter, and it's 21-0, and we're down. There is no panic. It's the same look that we had in our eyes when at any moment we had any moment of adversity going forward after that. There was never any doubt in any of our minds that we were going to find a way to win the game. We were going to find a way to do whatever we had to do. No panic. There is no yelling, no screaming. There is no mistrust. You don't let the other man down. The person next to you, you will do whatever you have to do, because that's who we are, and that's what we've produced here. So that type of empowerment, that type of organic, generic empowerment, there really is no replacement for that organic process. Once it takes place, and it had taken place at that moment, we were we were completely empowered. We were strong. We knew what we had built. We knew that no one had gone through what we've gone through in the last couple of years in terms of the humbling process of getting your brains beat in, the bad articles in the paper, being in a small market team in the Midwest that the fans kind of turn on you at times. No one had gone through 4 losing seasons. No one, was watching NFL films and inside the NFL seeing Dana Stubblefield, say the same old sorry ass Rams. No one, I was there when Ken Norton, was punching the goalpost, and people are coming in and they're doing that. Man, once we found our strength, are you kidding me? Once I knew, I looked up and I had Orlando Pace on one side, Fred Miller on the other, and I had a guy named Marshall Faulk in the backfield. Fuck you. I'm like, our defense, we've been playing good defense for years. Okay. But now we finally had it. We had me, DeMarco Farr, Ray Agnew. I mean, Mike Jones, London Fletcher, Todd Light, Keith Lyle, Dexter McLeon. Like we had Team UC. We had Magic. We had Lightning in a Bottle. We had Esprit de Corps. We had just a type of love amongst ourselves, and and how we did things that transcended anything that anyone could come close to. So our chemistry, that we had, and so that's the thing. It's like you talk about a head coach. A coach has to set these things in motion and has to talk about unreachable, materialistic things that are fantasy, and talk about all the ideals of team and integrity and love and all these things that when you really try to put a definition on them, you can't say what it is. But once you have it, it works.
Yeah,
Once you have it.
that team had great players. You would know how many Hall of Famers, and we'll get in. I mean, you by the way, you should be in the Hall of Fame.
And I've been to all their induction enshrinements. So I mean, we've got at least 4 and counting.
Yeah. It was quite the team, but it also had the glue guys, right? I mean, you and I played with a guy named Jeff Scanina. I played with Jeff a couple times.
Yep.
We played in Miami together, and then I played with him also in Houston.
Yep.
And I think Jeff played for 19 years, 18 years,
Yeah.
nose tackle, about 6'1". He would probably argue he was taller, but I don't think he was. probably the biggest calves and thighs of what, just these guys that's just a brick sort of body shape, but made basically the minimum wage minimum wage, the minimum NFL salary for almost all of those years. But like that guy was going to do exactly what was supposed to be done. He was going to be on it at all times. He didn't need to be really almost coached or parented or anything. It was just, but you get some super talented guys and then a whole slew of guys like Jeff that you would never remember for the average fan, but those guys are so important. And treated as equal as Marshall Faulk and these other guys as far as how they treat each other. And that's when you have a special team.
Like I said, everyone, no matter the contribution, big or small, we all felt we were the difference between winning and losing. And that unselfish nature about what we had, like I said, Jeff Scanina or Jeff Robinson or, Todd Collins or anyone who seemingly had a quote unquote lesser role. And you can't even really say that because, it's like it wasn't a lesser role because it was to take away their performance and we don't do what we did, and that's the thing. It's like everyone at one time or another had that pivotal, had the fate of the world in their hands, in one moment during the season. Everyone made a play that without that play, we don't go to Super Bowl. Everyone had one of those moments, it seemed like, during the year on our way to doing that, achieving that special feat. So,
well, as someone over here who was a number 2 and a number 3 quarterback a lot of my career and took more scout team reps than starting offensive reps over my years, everyone wants to play, but you do see the value in how you run the scout team. You do see the value on truly, we're playing against Tom Brady and how Tom operates. You're going to play against Peyton Manning. How he sort of operates.
Yeah.
You do see the value on giving the defense, quote unquote, a good look. But also on, you're organizing a bunch of misfit offensive linemen and the receivers, and sometimes there's a DB because your receivers are down. That's now playing wide receiver. I've played receiver since high school,
right?
And you're trying to get all these organized and like not jump off sides when he's a receiver. He's not used to going on hard pounds, and so it is a real challenge. And when you do it, I feel like I try to do it the best of my ability, but you do feel a respect from good defensive coordinator or because they know it's not an easy job, and you do feel like you're very much a part of the team in those situations. So a good head coach will make those types of players feel very valued because their impact on the team is important even if they never step on the field on Sunday.
And I think without that type of, I think the head coach has to set that in motion. Because I think that it's not a natural thing that most players will think of, and it's not something that people will think to circle back to, to give recognition or empower on certain levels. But I think if you have this coach, especially if he's, a little corny old man that look like he, can't play or can't, or whatever, or if someone believing that person and that person believing you and it's part of what makes it work. It's like you said, you can't have that. It's impossible to get that great look in practice without someone humbling themselves to be someone else. Without someone you're a, even though you were a number 2 or 3, on an NFL roster, there's only 1,900, guys playing in the NFL at one given time, a snapshot in the world. So you talk about a league that's so competitive that only 1,900 guys can actually be on rosters and play in one given moment. It's special. So how talented must you be to be a number 2 or to be a number 3 in the NFL? But the fact that you will run someone else's plays because that's your function or your role, in getting, the team ready to play, that type of trade-off, that type of buy-in, that type of shared, Coach Vermeil always told us that we had to be co-creators of our, and we were co-writing. So everything that, we had to feel that somehow the difference between winning and losing, or achieving or not achieving, was in our hands. It was in
Yeah.
our ability. So, but you have to do it. You have to make use of it. If you don't have that buy-in, then you get a bunch of beef and animosity and guys being jealous of other players, and your team doesn't go anywhere.
When we were together with Saban, he used to talk about, and I've seen in some speeches since then, about being on a bus, and basically the football team is a bus. He's driving the bus, and
Yeah.
everyone sits where he wants them to sit.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're in the front, sometimes you're in the middle, sometimes
Yeah.
you're in the back.
Mhm.
One, just like be happy you're on the bus.
Okay.
But you don't get to choose what your responsibility is, and wherever you're sitting, just do the best you can in that spot.
Right.
And I was always sort of like, well, I'm in that spot in the back, that like single seat, you know what I mean? Which is, again, on the bus, right? This is great, but it's also right by the exit, which is I'm the first one off. So, but there is this, what is your role? What is your responsibility? And then excel within that, and, if you're the starting safety, you can't play quarterback, nor can you be
Right.
the offensive coordinator. Right. And that's the hard thing, is that, sometimes there's frustration on the other side of the football, or other players or coaches. And all you can really control is yourself, and then your little group. Like, you're a DB, then you're the group, and then you're the defense. And that's all you really can
Right.
have an impact on. Oh, then positivity on the other side. I think every football player has lived through that. Let's move on to Tennessee. You're in Tennessee trade for a first round draft pick. If things were so great with Coach Vermeil, how come? What caused you to leave St. Louis?
In a nutshell, basically, I, just like a lot of players, had basically outplayed my contract. I was, 6th pick overall. By my third or fourth year, I was, close to the league lead in sacks, and one of the, it was a really good player. I went to my first Pro Bowl, we won Super Bowl, was all pro. And I was standing in Hawaii, about to play in the Pro Bowl, standing next to Robert Porcher, Michael Strahan, and Simeon Rice. And they all make probably 4 or 5 times more than I do at the time. They just had found, they had hit their contract stride and whatever. And it's a timing thing. And people don't know. If you're on the outside looking in, like, at contracts, like, if you're a lay person, you really don't know.
Yeah, $1 million or 10 million, it can be all sort of the same.
Yeah, and they're like, they're like, people are like, oh, you're making $2 million a year, at that time. What are you complaining about? I'm like, well, Strahan was making about 7.5, and technically I led the league in sacks. So I, kind of led the league in sacks for 3 years at that point. I'm like, and I'm still making $2 million. These guys are making 6 or 7. So, but I wasn't like, going to hold out or be like, oh, pay me or whatever. For me, it was just like, my contract's done. I went into you guys didn't renew me going into my 6th year, kind of knowing that, you offered 2 deals, and I think Kurt took a deal, and I think Isaac ended up taking a deal, but the money wasn't right. It wasn't structured right. So I didn't take it. So I'm like, I'll just play my contract out. No hard feelings. Well, Mike Martz took issue with that, because Vermeil had stepped down. And the backstory is, in a nutshell, Vermeil basically stepped down because there was pressure from, the whole Mike Martz camp, because he wanted to be written in as the next head coach or whatever. I don't know quite what the story is. That's my recollection of the circumstances, but it was something close to that. And so anyway, Vermeil steps down, says he's going to retire, and then Mike Martz takes over the year after Super Bowl. But this whole contract issue, Mike Martz took to heart. And I can honestly say that, because he and I have talked, and we're both, older, wiser, and, would not have made the same decisions at the time. I was young and, pissed off that I didn't get my contract, but I was more pissed off that they were starting to play games with me with the whole, franchise tag and, putting tags on me and doing stuff. And I'm like, look, man, if you like, I did everything you wanted to do. You guys gave me a deal as a rookie. We shook hands. I played that contract out. Now you're fucking with my money. Now you're fucking with my longevity, my livelihood. Like, we all love football. Okay. We all love football, but I'm not running through 8 brick walls, taking years off my life without this financial guarantee. Not playing for them.
As Junior Sal used to say, we all love football, but the football, well, you should say, we all love the NFL, but the NFL loves nobody.
Right. Exactly.
Which I disagree. It loves all the owners.
Yeah,
it feels like to me.
But so the thing is, none of us are playing just for the money, but none of us will play that game without it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just be real. I mean, we find another way to make something lucrative. And so at the time I was just like, I'm just done. I just want to go make the money I want to make. I can't afford to I'm getting older and I if I'm going to miss out on these paydays while I'm having my best years of football. I'm like, dude, how can I be leading the league in sacks? And I'm making a 4th annually of what, Strahan is making or what so-and-so's making. I'm like, that's bad business. That's you being a poor steward of, your ability and everything else, or you got a bad agent. Like, no, you got to do the right thing. So anyway, I think Mike Martz took it to heart and he thought it was more of an issue that I didn't want to play for him. Dick had retired. He had the magic. He was the father figure, and I didn't like him. And I'm like, Mike, I could care less about you. I don't give a shit about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to get my money, dude. Like, what are you talking? I'm like, this is not personal. I don't care. I'm not trying to piss in your face and say I don't want to play for the Rams or I don't want to play for you. I'm like, I've been playing this game for 6 years now, and I'm underpaid, bro. Like, no. So anyway, long story short, we have squabbles and words in the papers and, everything's ancient history. And I ended up being traded for a first-round pick, go to Tennessee. Really, really enjoyed playing for Jeff Fisher. It was at first glance, it seemed as though Jeff was a dry man's man coaches, like former player who basically was, like, do your job, was real, had a man approach, kind of treated you like a man and everything. But after being there for a while, I soon discovered that a lot of the same esprit de corps and love and empowerment and, everything that we had as the Rams, there's a reason we played them in the Super Bowl. Like, they had something special there too, between Steve and Eddie and, just the cornerstones, the Frank Wychecks and, Bruce Matthews and those guys. And they had, Brad Hopkins. They had some dudes.
Eddie George.
Telling you. I mean, they had Eddie George. They had men on their team. And so when I walked into that locker room, I was like, I better raise my game. I better make sure. And I fit right in, because I was made of the same stuff that a lot of those guys are made of. And, it was a great relationship. I really enjoyed playing for Jeff Fisher, playing opposite of the Freak, playing with John Thornton and Henry Ford and Joe Salavea, Albert Hainsworth. I mean, we had some dudes on the defensive line. We had some great teams. Went to and lost an AFC championship game to the Raiders, and they would go on to end up losing to the Buccaneers, who won the Super Bowl in 2003. So had a couple of playoff runs with the Titans, but great time, great esprit de corps, great group of guys, and a wonderful time in my life. And the funny thing is, I was finally making the money that I was supposed to make. So, sometimes you have to, and I think that's the lesson learned. And as I look back on it, I've had people say, Kevin, you've got 104.5 sacks. You played 14 years, never missed a game. You have one of the longest active streaks of a non-quarterback and all this stuff. How come I've never heard about you being up for the Hall of Fame or whatever? People say that and they're like, oh, you're good enough to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, it's not why I played, it's not, and I'm not overly concerned about it. And having the respect of people that have gold jackets is great, and having the respect of people who say that I could have a gold jacket is even better. So, but I want to say that to say that, when I went to Tennessee and when I went into that locker room, sometimes you have to leave the team that drafted you in order to get the money and get the financial security that you know, we're trying to get out of this game. Shame on you if you go into this game and you play for 10 or 15 years, and because you were a good guy and decided to help the team and whatever, you know, your portfolio doesn't look like it should. You know, you're not in. That's shame on you, man. I mean, I'm sorry. Like you take years off your life, and when it's all said and done, no one's gonna come back and cut you a check for, you know, for being a good guy. You know, for taking less money so they can pay more people or do whatever.
Well, Kevin, you had some great years in Tennessee. I recall when I was in Miami playing with Dave Wanstead, we came up to you guys and practiced against you. Now, when teams do this, there are two fields. All right. Now, there is no JV and varsity in these scrimmages, but there are the ones and some of the twos, and then there's the twos, threes, and fours, or the threes and fours over here. I was over here, whooping up on your undrafted free agents over there. But I feel like I met you or talked to you like very quickly during that time, because I sort of knew who I sort of knew who you were. You know what I mean? I was up close and personal with you. And then we trade, or you're a free agent. I think you're a free agent, and you come, and I'm in Miami for my 4th year, and you come there to want to be a part of the Nick Saban NFL experience. And so I think you and I'm not sure if there's anybody else, played for both Steve Spurrier and Nick Saban.
Yeah.
It might be the two that might be the common bond here. Total opposites, both very successful Hall of Fame coaches.
Yeah.
What tell me about your Nick Saban experience in Miami, 2005.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is it was in Tennessee, and then, you know, Floyd Reese, God rest his soul, the GM of the Tennessee Titans at the time, called me into his office, and he says, "Look, you know, we're going younger. You know, we're rebuilding." He's like, "I got a ton of respect for you. Just going to tell you before we do this." He's like, "We're gonna go ahead and release you because you still got a lot of football to play, and like you're gonna get 2 calls when you leave my office." He's like, you know, Mike Fox is going to call you. You know, they're really interested. And I talked to Belichick, you know, so he's always been interested in you, and, you know, going to see if they can work something out. He says, so you're going to get some calls, you know, so this is a happy, sad day, you know, and he was and I liked Floyd, you know, had a lot of respect for him. And so I was kind of bittersweet walking out of his office, like, okay, well, you know, the bad news is I got to go tell my wife, you know, the bad news is, you know, we got to move and we're out of a job. The good news is we'll probably make more money, you know, next year, wherever we go, and, you know, hitting the free agent market at the right time. And so I'm driving home from Floyd Reese's office in Nashville that day, and the first call I get isn't from either one of them. It's from Jason Taylor. And Jason Taylor calls me, and he's like, "What's up, dude?" And I'm like, "Hey, Jason, how are you?" You know, like, Jason and I don't talk. You know, we're friendly. You know, I know him, he knows me. You know, we're both defensive players, hung out at the Pro Bowl. You know, we're cool. But I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "What are you gonna do?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I gonna do?" And he's like, You're out of Tennessee, right?" And I was like, how the hell did you know I was out of Tennessee? I hadn't even hit the paper yet. I just left Floyd Reese's office. How the hell do you know that I'm out of a job? And he's like, "Well, I'm sitting here, you know, with Nick, you know." And I'm like, "Nick who?" He's like, "Saban, you know." And he's like, "Look," he's like, "We got Bonnie Holiday, we got Big Truck, you know, Keith Trailer." And he says, "Are you coming?" And right then I'm like, you know what? This is not a conversation for you and I. I said, it's a conversation. I said because really bottom line is the money. Bottom line is the deal's right. You know, we can have a conversation. If not, then, you know. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't think that's really the case. I don't think that's really the issue, KC. Just, you know, get your number and have your agent call him back." And I was like, "Okay." So I literally called my agent. I'm like, what the hell's going on with Miami? And my agent's like, oh yeah, we got you. Basically, they want you to play. They're going to play this 3-4-4-3. Going to play Belichick's defense. They're going to do this whole thing, and they got the personnel there. But basically, Jason Taylor, he's like the missing piece. Either he's going to stay and play the buck, or he's leaving to go to Washington or wherever he was going to go at the time. And so, but basically they needed me to be the third end, do the dirty work, to be the fall guy, and and let all the linebackers, win every award, which they did for the next 2 years. And so I ended up coming down there, and for me, it was a great opportunity because I had never played in a 3-4, like full time. And this defense, very high football IQ defense to play in, kind of a 3-4/4-3 hybrid defense that could do anything. It could line up and present as almost anything. And the personnel that you had to play it had to have the collective football IQ, and as well as the athletic ability and the strength and the size to be able to two-gap, single-gap, do everything and go seamlessly through that transition, all the while running complex blitzing schemes and zone dogs and everything else. And we had the perfect cast and crew to do it with. I mean, it was, like I said, myself, Keith Traylor, Bonnie Holiday, Jason Taylor, David Bowens, Zach Thomas, Junior Seau, Jason Taylor, Jeremiah Bell, Sam Madison. I mean, it was a squad. And
I know. I had been there. I had been there for 3 years before that, and
yeah.
I think our salary cap was about 70-30 defense to offense. It was like we had Ricky and we ran him to the ground until he quit, basically. And Chris Chambers is pretty good, but other than that, we were not spending a lot of money on offense, and we just. Brock Marion earlier, he was making a good amount of money at safety. Dallas Cowboy. Yeah. It had been one of the best defense in the National Football League pretty much since Jimmy Johnson showed up, and Jason and Zach and those guys. And so you were joining like a sort of not an all-star defense, but
they were.
You knew it was gonna be one of the best defenses.
Tim Bowens. I mean, just we had dudes, man. We had just the strength, especially up front. And so for me, it was a great opportunity. At that point in my career, I'd never played in a 3-4 defense, and I looked forward to being part of a really good, seasoned, high football IQ group. And for me, it was a weird situation in Miami because Nick Saban was sort of a dictator in terms of how he treated people. And I think that was the biggest issue with people didn't like about him, because he treated people differently, and to this day, like I've talked to, to Coach Saban, and we talked about being in Miami, and, there are things, going back in time that he would have done differently. And, you can always look back, in hindsight is perfect science, but he was very, I think because of the personnel we had on that defense, like I still enjoyed going to work. Like I loved the room that I was in. Dan Quinn was our defensive line coach, and he wasn't a defensive line coach. He was a coordinator or head coach. And we used to joke with him and tease him. Richard Smith coached our linebackers. Dom Capers ran our defense. Will Muschamp coached our DBs, and ranted, raged, and screamed everywhere. Kirby Smart was quality control. You know what I'm saying? And it's like I'm bitching at Kirby Smart because I don't have a page in my blitz report. Missing one of my things in my blitzes in my playbook, Kirby. And at the time, again, I tell Kirby every day, Kirby, when you're a big time head coach, don't act like you don't fucking know me. Don't act too highbrow when you see me years from now, because there was a lot of talent just that had been assembled there. And that's one of the common threads that you see with great coaches, and what we're talking about earlier. But Nick Saban, you see it now. He surrounds himself with the best coaches. And if you're doing something better than he's doing it and you're not in his camp, he wants you in his camp so he can learn from you. And so being a part of that defense was really special. It was a lot of fun playing with Jeff Scanina and, Timbo and David Bowens and, Jason and Vonnie and Big Truck. And we had the best room so much fun going to work. It was hard because we didn't win. We had our troubles, and we were struggling to offensively to make things work.
We didn't have a great offense. Our offense had not been great in Miami before he got there. It was better. It was better than the I think the Norv Turner offenses that were there my first couple years. We did probably throw the ball more, try to be more creative, but it was an okay offense. We started 3-7. We won our last 7 games or something like that, last 6-7 games to go 9-7. There was one game, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got things to do. There was one game where I had a personal great game in my life. You played 14 seasons, never missed a game, started almost every one of those games. I did not. I had 12 starts in my 12 years. And there are certain games that are extremely special to me. One of those is Miami Buffalo. I'm not sure when that was, probably in November, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
We're down. Talking about that game and your experience, because that's, probably one of the few times, our relationship together, some of that is sort of playing and rooting for the other guy. And that's one of the few times where I was really out there and helping the ball club. And I wasn't the guy run the scout team.
Well, that's that whole run, though. I think that's kind of what endeared me to being in Miami, because it was rough. Like when I got there, we'd had a couple of massive hurricanes that came through, and we lost power early in the season. It was typical Miami. I mean, Florida's best and worst place in the world, right? It's like there's great stuff there. There's also horrible stuff there. And, but yeah, it was a situation where we were kind of on the comeback later in the season, and we finally found our stride. I think we weren't too conservative on offense, but we had learned to not turn the ball over. And I think, we were able to lean on the strength of winning vertical field position with the field position that our defense created, and, their ability to not drive and sustain drives. And that game in particular, like I remember, Jason was so pissed. Like he's pissed. He's like, I don't want to lose to these fucking guys. And we're looking at their offense, and we're like, they're not good enough to beat us.
JP Lossman.
Yeah. I'm like, man, these guys, they aren't anything special, but it's like, but up until that point, we had been put in such bad positions, by our offense and turning the ball over and stuff that we were just struggling to get off the field and give up a field goal and not, and to not let the bleeding, because we knew that we'd be back on the field in a little while because we weren't scoring points and maintaining, possession of the football. But that game, Sage, that was one of the bright spots. And I remember you had a heck of a game. I'm like, I was almost tempted to look up your stats from that day, but I don't know. I think Chris Chambers had a pretty good day that day.
Yeah, Chris had 16 catches for like 200 some yards. Yeah. We were down 23-3 going to the fourth, and Gus had gotten a concussion like late in the third. I had one drive in the fourth that we moved the ball, but then we punted. And then I think we ended the game on 3 straight touchdowns, but also like 3 straight 3-and-outs, basically defensively. It was like we got the ball back, pretty quickly, especially at the end where we did score. And I think there's 2.5 minutes left. We had our timeouts, and they didn't get a first down. I mean, you guys were like that, like, hey, we have to get a stop. Oh, okay. Our defense will just get a stop. Like you guys could do that.
But that's the thing though. Like we had that ability to do that, but I think we also had the age and the personnel that knew what the situation called for. Everyone had been there before. So there was no panic in that moment. We were just like, let's fucking go take care of business. And like, we all kind of got in gear and did that. And, and I remember in that moment being on the sideline, because I couldn't remember what it was, why you were, because Gus had a concussion. Gus was knocked the fuck out. That's right. He was done. And we had 3 3-and-outs in that second half, giving ourselves a chance to win. And I remember like Jason wouldn't sit down. Jason was walking back and forth in front of like the end of the bench, because we all sat on the very end. Like our DBs were here, and then our linebackers were there, and then the defensive line was all the way at the end of the bench. And he would not sit down. And he was like, I'm not fucking leaving here losing, and he's walking up and down, he's going up and down, and going down. And then, and he's, and so we go out there, we get like the first 2-3 and outs. And then we came to the sideline and, and I remember, and like, it's funny how like the relationship between people, and in that moment, like, I think my personality is like, I'm not a panicker, and I'm sort of level-headed and kind of even when it comes to that. I'm very sensitive. My personality is big, but when it comes to a panic situation or in the heat of battle, I get really even and metered and focused. And Jason is kind of, I don't know, well, not that he's hysterical or he's, panicky, but he seems to be more vocal and he lets a little bit more of it out. And he won't let me go, and he's like got a hold of me and he's like, KC, we got to get this. And like, and I think, as I look back on that time, and I know you didn't ask this question, but like the relationship that Jason and I had was, I was very much like a calming force, just like when he called me to see if I was coming to come play with him or he was leaving. It's like he wasn't going to stay if I wasn't there. And I know there's a fundamental difference between, your left end and your right end, your guy that the quarterback can see and the guy that's coming from the blind side. There's a real symbiotic, there's a real relationship that, you as defensive linemen, you can either be selfish and help one another. You can build walls. You can do all kinds of things you can do to help each other. And I think from playing with him, he knew that I knew that. And I was a very unselfish player in my nature anyway. I always did what the team needed. And in that moment, I remember being on the sideline and such a happy day. And I know it's a happy day in your memory. I know it sticks out in your mind. You remember because it was the game you got to start. But I remember just the small wins because I knew what it was like to come into the NFL and lose and get my brains beat in. Yes, I have a Super Bowl ring. Yes, I have a Lombardi trophy, but the majority of seasons for the majority of players in this game is losing. It's
Failures.
Failures.
Well, 9-7's a failure, if you
Yeah.
don't make the playoffs, or now it's 9-8 or even a 10-7 if you're in the wrong division. Yeah, I mean, if you don't go to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, you end up being it's not good enough. And then there's the aspect of like you've won the Super Bowl, and then as soon as it's that sort of done, all right, March 1st, here we go.
Right.
Like, it's going, and we're a couple of weeks behind and we're tired and we're still sort of beat up from the season going an extra 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
And, and the off season got shorter all of a sudden.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it is a never ending battle out there. It was a great day for me personally. Throwing a touchdown pass at the end of the game to win it on a big comeback. I think it broke Marino's record or for fourth quarter comebacks or something.
Oh, wow.
Dan has 9,000 records, and I think I have one in Dolphins history. But that was a great day. It's interesting, these special moments in your own personal life, and if you're around other people, it might be special for a different reason.
Yeah.
But they remember it because that day was a special day.
I remember that day because, man, the wins are hard to come by on Sunday, and people. I think that's the thing you realize you get to the NFL is you don't take winning for granted because their win on Sunday, man, it's sometimes when you haven't had one in a while, it's like and so for me at that point in my career, like it wasn't about going to another Super Bowl. For me, it was about coming close to recreating that esprit de corps with a group of guys, that I had. And whenever I could have that, whenever I could have a snapshot, great day. Yes, the reality is I make a lot of money doing what I do and I love it. And it's taken years off my life. But right now, everything is right in the world. Right now, everything worked out. Right now, it's like you roll your plan out there, you plan your work, you worked your plan, and it everything turned out. The beer tastes a little sweeter. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm going to enjoy, coming down from this and just a little bit more. So those happy days that you're able to give yourself in the midst of that journey, sometimes are the things that, years later, 50-year-olds get together and talk about. So
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that our paths crossed somewhere along the way. We had a couple barbecues, cookouts. When you go through hurricanes, the
yeah,
freezer's not working, the refrigerator is not working. That meat's going to go bad, and what is working is the grill. And so, my family's out of town, your family's out of town. Everyone leaves, but the players. We still got
right.
to practice, and so you stopped over a couple of times. You had some great conversations, great bus ride conversations, and of course the away games. I
Yeah,
know you sat right in front of Nick State because you're one of the older guys, and so you're in first class, where all of us are, in the back, with Coach Saban. So a lot of great memories from my 1 year with you, and it was great seeing you in Canton.
yeah.
Zach Thomas's recent induction. I know you were there for that, and I truly believe you should be in the Hall of Fame. I think that you have great stats, but your game is so far beyond the stats. Your game are all the stats that don't show up as one of the various forms of defensive statistics that you can compile. And for those reasons, you're a Hall of Famer without a doubt. One of the great men who I think have ever stepped foot in the National Football League. And there's a lot of characters all over the map. And
Yeah.
I see why Steve Spurrier, why he liked you so much. I see why Lou Holtz thought you were perfect for Notre Dame. Glad I met you along the way, and good luck to you. No college football questions. Like, who's going to win the national championship this year? This is what you do on Saturdays, right? College football.
Yeah.
Right now, who's going to win the national championship?
You might not like my answer right now. Right now, the best team in college football is Michigan.
It is.
It is. People think it's Texas, because Quinn Ewers is playing out of his mind. Okay, and their defense seems to be for real. They matched up physically with Alabama, and I think everyone saw that on full display. So they kind of passed their big test. But I think the other big test is they got to beat a team that not only has the 5 stars and has the strength along the line of scrimmage. Now you have to find a complete team, like a team like, let's say, an Ohio State with an evolved Kyle McCord, or Michigan as they exist now with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in the background. That defense and J.J. McCarthy. It's like, beat a complete team, and I think they're going to have a big test tomorrow when they play Oklahoma. So that we'll know a lot about them. But to me, the best team is Michigan right now. I can't say the Ohio State University because of the lack of evolution with their quarterback. That's going to take a while. That's a process. The same thing can be said for Georgia. Georgia they've lost 29 players to the draft in the last 2 years. And that type of attrition, you can't take it lightly. You see the difference in how their inability to squelch every offense that they play like they have in the past. So, but they're still great too. And Carson Beck is developing for Georgia. So I think the playoff picture, in college football, talking about 4 or 5 good teams, Georgia, you're talking about FSU out of the ACC. You're talking about Ohio State, Michigan in the Big Ten. We'll see who's better out of Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12. And the Pac-12, unfortunately, is once again the cannibal conference. It's got some of the best quarterback play in the country. You've got easily 4 or 5, counting the Cam Wards and Bo Nixes and Michael Penix Jr.'s and Caleb Williams and of the world. And Cam Rising hasn't even come back to Utah yet. And I mean, Pac-12 is loaded with great quarterback play. I'm talking guys who can, process, over 75% efficient, a gang of yards. But at the same time, it's going to be, I'm hard pressed to think that there's going to be one team that's going to be able to emerge from that conference to represent in the college football playoff. But we'll see.
October 21st, I think, in a couple weekends, I'm calling the Michigan State game. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
From what I've seen so far, just so far this year, Michigan extremely physical football, and
Yes.
that's Jim Harbaugh. Physicality. He doesn't have some wide open playbook, and he doesn't have some special fancy defense.
Right.
He can get the talent there. Because it's Michigan, and 2 NIL, I'm sure, on top of it. But he just beats you down, his football teams, and he's got great talent on that football team, and I don't know, probably the best quarterback that he's had. Since he's been there.
Yeah.
Definitely a very good one in McCarthy. So it is interesting, by the way, Ohio State with McCord. I did a football camp a few years ago when these kids were all in high school, and I had Drake May from North Carolina and Kyle McCord just doing 3-step drops, throwing, 5-step drops, throwing, 7-step drops, throwing, right? And you just film them, and you just sort of see them next to each other. And for me, I was like, Drake May is going to be the better player. So you could just like sort of see the guys that are a little bit smoother, a little bit quicker. The ball comes out faster. The processing is a little bit different. And so I don't know, but they're 17-year-old kids, right? So, who knows? But I thought Drake May was going to be a great player. And McCord didn't seem to have that juice, that sort of quick energy that I feel like you need to be a really good quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad quarterback, but he looks pretty good so far. But
so far you're right.
Right.
So far you're right.
Yeah.
Drake May is balling out, and he's doing more with less where he is. I mean, Kyle McCord is surrounded with 5 stars as far as the eye can see.
That's one of the issues almost of going to a school that's too good, is you never have to sort of overcome. Brock Purdy at Iowa State had to run around and make plays and sort of overcome against Oklahoma's and Texas and the Big 12 defenses. And Drew Brees was like that at Purdue. I've talked to for quarterback development. I've talked about this a lot, is actually a lot of the quarterbacks who are not on the great teams,
Pat Mahomes,
on those teams that there was more responsibility on you. And maybe you only went 7-6 in college, but and I don't even know how many yards you threw for, but you were responsible.
On your shoulders.
It was on the quarterback.
You were the one having to move heaven and earth to do it.
And those guys a lot of times make great pro quarterbacks, even if they were not at the top programs. So Kevin, I'll let you go. I appreciate your time. Good luck. Enjoy New York this weekend. Fall is here.
Yes.
I'm sure Central Park would be gorgeous. That's gorgeous all around the Midwest and the Northeast. So safe travels back to Tampa, and let's talk soon.
Anytime.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.